Yeah, that's right, we are back in the back garden shed. This week has been pretty exciting because I've been working on the Frontside 50/50 grind. Okay, the Frontside 50/50 grind. Let's see what we're aiming for. Approach a transition with loads of speed, feet in the regular stance. Carve up the transition on a bit of an angle, get locked in with your heel side wheels on the coping, travel along, and then it's time to pivot back in, bit of pressure on that back heel, pop the board off the coping, and Bob's your uncle. Oh my gosh, I've been wanting to get this one for ages, but I've always been held back by a bit of fear. So I felt the best strategy was to acclimatise myself to that pull coping and the shape of the transition by trying a few frontside axle stalls. This helped me get a feel of the amount of speed I needed to lock those heel side wheels up onto the coping, and also reminded me of some of the key points of coming back in, which was to put plenty of pressure on that heel side back foot and then pivot back off of the coping, do a little pop, come back down, keeping the knees slightly bent to ride away. My goal for session one was to simply get up and lock in on the coping, travel along a little bit, compose myself, and then back in for the re-entry. So I entered into my first little mini battle. Okay, that was pretty exciting, and I found there was plenty that could go wrong. Let's talk through some of the key issues. The first one was coming up a bit short and not quite making it on the top of the coping. Just coming up and getting those toe side wheels hooked on, and it was a bit of a precarious position, sort of sliding out, fearing for the shins and the knees. I found the remedy was to go faster, and this was a bit counterintuitive because I was going in, take it nice and careful, don't want to go crazy, but actually more speed was the safer option. The second issue I encountered was not quite pivoting enough on the coping and coming up in a sort of feeble stall, and this led the board to stop pretty abruptly, and the areas that got a bit of a battering were the front elbow and the front hip. I found that the remedy was to keep my front shoulder in line with the coping as I came up to pivot on that back truck. The feeble just came from not being committed to pivoting round and keeping that shoulder in line. And a recurring theme that I found with this front shoulder is basically I would go wherever that front shoulder was pointed. So trying to get that in line with the coping really helped the grind to happen along the coping as I went along. So coming up feeble really sucked, and that was one that I was mindful to avoid. Another issue I was having was getting up on the coping and then stopping dead. This was due to too much front foot pressure and not setting the front truck onto the grind. Just hammering that front truck down onto the coping made it stop dead and dig in. So the remedy for that was to try and be a little bit more finessed with the foot pressures, get up and be a bit more gentle when setting that front truck down. The next issue was getting locked into the grind, travelling along a bit and then sort of dribbling off of the coping and just riding away. And again, I found this was because my shoulder was not following the coping, and also the big remedy was to try and keep my weight and my body more inside the transition, and this helped me not come up on top of the board, overbalance and then steer off of the coping. So I found it pretty scary to trust those heel side wheels would grip and lean back into the transition, but whenever I did it a little bit more than I thought was safe, that seemed to get the best result and allow me to be in a position to come back in. For the re-entry, I found I just needed a little bit of time to settle myself, go through my pre-flight checks, and then loads of pressure on that back heel, pop the nose off, full commitment, and hopefully ride away. This first session was good training, but it was nowhere near the frontside 50-50 that I was looking for. I found it pretty frustrating to keep pausing before I came back in, so the goal for session 2 was simple: try and re-enter while still moving across that coping. I found the biggest barrier to attempting that re-entry was fear. I got locked in and started travelling across the coping quite nicely, but then when it was time to re-enter, I'd just jump off the board. The only times I came a cropper is when I hesitated, and that put me in no man's land, and it was a short, sharp trip to the flat bottom. I found every time that I really committed and tried to send it back in, it came out pretty much okay. My goal for session 3 was to add more speed, travel further, and come back in whilst moving faster. And I noticed that the local rippers do a sort of cross lock on the coping. So that's heel side wheel against the coping, but toe side wheel also against the coping. This feels super committed, and whenever I see the local guys doing it, they seem to race around there at breakneck speed. So my goal for session 3 was to try and lock in on this cross lock and see if it helped me get a longer and faster grind. That crosslock 50-50 position felt really good and definitely helped to deliver the results I was looking for. The key thing that helped me get into this was even more speed, and to do this I changed my line in the pool. So I did a big backside carve, pumped down the transition, and then came back up and took a little bit of the hit again to pump up onto the top. The other things that helped me get into the crosslock were my foot pressures and my body position. First of all, the foot pressures were a bit counterintuitive. I found I needed more back foot pressure and more back heel pressure, but when I did that it was easy to spoon off the back because I was just leaning backwards as opposed to just putting more foot pressure whilst keeping my body centered. The other thing that helped me was trying to keep my core nice and tight and not break at the waist. Keeping my core tight kept the shoulders and the head out in the transition, and that gave me somewhere to pump from so I could actually swish my legs across the coping and this helped me maintain the speed of the grind. And then coming back in, that was a little bit tricky with this cross lock, and it was quite easy to get hooked up. So I found the best policy there was to really pop off the back heel, pop the nose up and pop the board back in, and that helped avoid the chances of hanging up. One slight issue I had getting into the cross lock was overcooking it and going into a front Smith position. Now this was pretty exciting because I've always wanted to be able to do the front Smith grind. Obviously nowhere near because I wasn't really trying for it, and I found that I just got immediately hooked up because my foot pressures were wrong for the front Smith, but it definitely sowed the seeds of possibility. I found the thing that I needed to do was just calm down a bit on the pivot and not try and get that cross lock too far. Just get it onto the coping and then set the grind and whiz around. Okay, that's it for the frontside 50-50 grind video. There's plenty going on here, but I found the incremental approach definitely helped me achieve my goal of a fast and fluid frontside grind. I would say overall the key points are to take as much speed in as possible, experiment with the foot pressures, keep the core tight, and try and lean back into the transition just a little bit more than you feel is safe. I think the pull coping is a double-edged sword. It's great to lock into, and you can't beat that sound. But it's probably a little easier to hang up on, and generally pull coping is accompanied by a slightly steeper transition. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit subscribe. I make new videos every week. You can also follow me on Instagram @JohnBishopSkate. As ever, my name's been John Bishop, and I'm a middle-aged guy learning how to skate.